Going into this year's legislative session, all the talk about marijuana involved whether New Mexico would legalize it for recreational use. That didn't happen, as you know, but major changes have been made to the state's medical marijuana program, which had been languishing somewhat under the Martinez administration. The state just added opioid addiction as a permitted use for medical marijuana, and just this week finalized plans for a change to the production rules that allow producers to expand their operations. So joining me today to give their opinions on this topic and others, we have Andy Lyman. He's a reporter at the New Mexico Political Report. Line regular Tom Garrity is here of the Garrity Group PR. Ed Perea is back. He's a lawyer, former police officer, and executive director at the Center for Law, Policy, and Public Safety. And longtime friend of the show, Martha Burke. She's back, political psychologist, author of the book, Your Voice, Your Vote, and a second printing is coming when?
January 2020.
I love it. Congratulations. Well deserved. All right. Andy, you wrote about this last week in New Mexico Political Report. Alzheimer's, autism spectrum, 3 degenerative disease, neurological disorders got added, along with that opioid thing I just mentioned. It's been a bit of a time coming here. No great surprise. The governor had made this promise on the opioid bit on the campaign trail, but your overall sense of all these additions as well. What's going on here with the organization?
So I think there was, I don't want to say a backlog, but sort of a issue there with opioid use disorder, where I believe it was twice under the previous administration. There's a group called the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board, and they serve exactly as that, as an advisory board to the Secretary of Health. And twice they recommended to add this condition to the list. Twice the previous secretary took a lot of time and finally came back and did her own research with her own staff, and she denied it both times. This time around, the governor campaigned on that we're going to add this. The secretary also came out, the current secretary, Kunkel, came out and said, I will take almost all the recommendations from the board, put trust back into that board. And so it wasn't too much of a surprise. At the hearing, when the board actually heard these petitions, they announced, the secretary told us that, you know, what we recommend she will seriously consider. So it's sort of a big deal now that and so maybe that's sort of the like I said, the bottleneck there of now things are getting through. And so that's why we have this pile of 6 conditions coming through. Yeah.
And good point there, Ed. You know, it's interesting, Andy mentioned that the previous DOH had turned this down twice. There was actually a veto by the Martinez administration in that mix as well on opioid stuff that just, you know, that was not happening. And advocates are thrilled right now, but they've been waiting a long time for this. It seemed very clear the last couple of years that medical marijuana and opioid addiction was clearly a marriage made for New Mexico. Why did it take so long in your view? What happened there that last time around?
I think the previous administration was just a little bit adverse to any sort of narcotics, opiates, anything of that sort. There was, you know, resistance to that from the get-go. They were set on not, you know, opening up any other option to some of the pains and illnesses that are affecting New Mexicans. And it wasn't until the new administration came in and they realized after much research and listening to the experts that there was such a need. And we were falling a little behind. You know, most of the other 33 states in the United States have some sort of medical cannabis policy. And so we were just a little bit behind the curveball. And I think right now we're getting up to speed. Now we need to move slowly because there are a lot of issues associated yet with medical cannabis.
Go ahead and speak to that. If you've got a point of view on that, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Why the caution from your point of view?
Well, one of the things that are happening is there are 11 states in the United States that have recreational marijuana policies. And what they're seeing in many of those states is that as more states open up their recreational marijuana policies, is those individuals who use medical marijuana leave those roles and go into just the recreational use. And what that does is that has a major impact on the cost for those people who need medical cannabis. And so we need to be very careful as we look at expanding the amount of plants that are authorized, because there can be a time that we may run into a real problem with overproduction of medical cannabis.
Interesting points there. Let's talk about that in a second, because that plant thing is interesting for sure, the new thought on that we have from our folks in Santa Fe. Do you have a thought on that? That's an interesting point that Ed's making.
Absolutely, I
Okay.
have. Now, lightning's getting ready to strike because Martha Burke's going to talk about the free market.
Oh, wow. I love it.
But actually, a big part of this latest go-round has been expanding the number of plants.
Right.
And that's because right now demand is outstripping the supply. But I wonder, Ultra Health, other players that are coming in, what is their agenda here? May have nothing to do with opioid or these other things. What's happened, Gene, is we've created an artificial shortage.
I see.
And now we are trying to fix that artificial shortage by bringing in more plants. Fine. Do we want to go the route in the future and just look down the road, look at the southern states that have tobacco allotments? That is a license for a monopoly. Is that where we're going with this? Let's let the free market settle this thing.
Interesting point.
Instead of saying, well, you can have so many plants and you can have so many, you're manipulating the market. Now, the Republicans love the market, so why not let them do their thing?
That's interesting to chew on. That's very interesting. I'm not sure how well that would be received from those who were looking to angle in on this.
Right.
Because like all other American business, the early players always sort of grab the lion's share, and then everybody else sort of fights after that. You know, Tom, on Martha's point, we have 73,000 plus statewide enrolled in the medical marijuana program. That's a big spike, even in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, with these new plant rules, are we even going to get out of what Martha's describing here? Are we going to be back in another backlog situation at some point?
Well, you know, to put that number into perspective, it's about a little less than 4% of the state's population qualifies for the state cannabis program, medical cannabis program. And at least more than half of the existing producers are having trouble keeping pace with all the demand. You know, it was at 450 plants. There was an overcorrection to 2,500 plants, and now it's been brought back to about 1,700 and 1,750. You know, to the person who is relying on this, you know, who has their permit to get medical cannabis, you know, they don't care what the number is. They just want to be able to, you know, get what they need.
That's right.
But you know, the limiting that I think that both Martha as well as Andy has brought up, and Ed as well, is really important to consider because, you know, are you going to overtest the system? Like what we saw happen, or has been cited anyways, happening in Portland, Oregon, where they just opened up the floodgates and all of a sudden the medical cannabis program is no longer sustainable.
That's right.
So, you know, a very interesting argument, and I think there's definitely a lot more science with this than I think all of us first anticipated with, you know, as far as opening up the free, you know, to let the market decide. No, it's a lot more sensitive than that because you have to keep it affordable for those who, you know, rely on this.
Good point there. You know, Andy, there was an interesting study not long ago that showed 63% of New Mexicans know someone who is or has been addicted to opioids. 63%. That's a phenomenal number. And does that not partly speak to the need at play here?
I think it might. Some of the folks that I've spoken with, addiction specialists, people that have been addicted before, just people in the community, there's sort of this, I think, a misunderstanding from the general public that are not in this world that people will just start using cannabis literally just to replace an opioid, which it may be part of it, but there's also a whole lot of other things that go into that. You know, what kind of regimen you're on. What kind of therapy you go to, what, you know, you're trying to not be addicted. I think there's some concern about just switching one out for the other. Some people say as long as, you know, cannabis is not toxic to you like opioids are. But I think there's so many other factors into this that it's just one little tool. And one thing that DOH will say over and over again is that this law is meant to alleviate symptoms of these conditions. It's not meant to completely eliminate it. So in this case, you know, if it's physical symptoms, muscle aches, nausea, something like that, then I think it could be a good tool. But I don't know that it's necessarily intended to say you just start using cannabis and then you'll be off of opioids.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
But if you could, wouldn't that be a good thing?
Yes, I mean there's the school of thought that that even if that is the case, you're better off than being addicted to this other substance. So.
Gene, that 63%, it's crisis mode. I mean, we've allowed this to go on for so long. 20 years, 30 years ago, we remember hearing about this.
That's right.
Northern New Mexico was known as the heroin addiction capital of the world 20 or 30 years ago, and we just allowed that to go. And now that it's a national issue, we're paying a lot more attention to it.
That's right.
it's about time.
You know, one of the ways, Ed, you'd find interesting, I read that people get themselves in trouble with opioids is dental work, is wisdom teeth being taken out. That is often the first chance, especially for younger people. That's their entry literally into opioids. They've never even taken one before. They have their wisdom teeth out, there's pain, these docs just write a script, just going, you see what I mean? It's part of the problem here, part of a bigger issue here with opioids. We need to get our arms around, don't we?
And Gene, you're right. You know, it was probably perceived as the miracle drug, 20 or
Right.
30 years
That's
ago,
right.
and then didn't realize the high level of addiction. We had a lot of young athletes. I was a former
That's right.
high school coach, and we had athletes with minor injuries, and they go to the doctor, and
That's
the
right.
doctor would prescribe them an opiate for their injury. They'd use it for a short period of time. When they're ready to get back, they're hooked on it. And it really, the medical profession in many cases is very much a disservice to young adults.
But now that we know, why not try the idea that cannabis would substitute in some cases, or at least alleviate some of the symptoms so people could get off of it? I don't see a downside to that.
Interesting point there, I wonder. Andy, I'm not ignoring your question, I guess a little short on time. I want to get one more thought in here. Help me clear up something, Andy. There's a rule change for the medical cannabis program coming up in July. I'm a little confused as what's going on there. What's
So
happening?
I'll try to be brief here, but there's sort of a lot to unpack there. Like as Tom said, there was $450 for years, and then they raised it to $2,500. A story I wrote, kind of examined that. I think they came up with that number they were in the middle of a lawsuit where a judge said you have to come up with a number. We don't care what that number is, but it has to be based on statistics. It has to be based on something tangible. They came up with $2,500, doing some basic math, but also they were, they were at a point where the judge said at this certain point there is no plant count unless you come up with something. And now they're trying to, I think, they'd done surveys talking to patients and producers, and they came up with this new number, which could be a problem now because, as I just found out, Duke Rodriguez, who runs Ultra Health, a big producer in New Mexico, there's a new law that goes into effect this weekend, and it says it changes resident of New Mexico to person as a qualified patient.
Oh, wow.
Which means the way he reads it is that it opens up to people in Texas. So he's running ads out on the eastern part of the state that says, hey, if you're a Texas resident and you want to become part of this program, come on over and see a doctor. So I think the numbers, that number that could come up in the hearing in July. That is this number okay for? And it's not just Texas, Arizona. They have their own medical program.
That's right.
It costs $150 to get your card. New Mexico, it's free. So there's a lot.
There's that free market at play again. Right, exactly right.
Exactly.
Glad you got that in. We'll have to wrap that topic up, but when we come back to the line after a while, we'll look at a lawsuit filed this week by the state of New Mexico against the Trump administration.